Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Wendy Wilcox, and I'm the Chief Women's Health Officer for the system.
I'm Nicole Jordan Martin. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Community Care.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Svetlana Lipyanska, and I'm the CEO of South Brooklyn Health.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Marengo, Senior Vice President of Communications and Marketing.
Hi, everyone. CEO for NYC Health Hospitals Metropolitan, Christina Contreras.
Okay, welcome, panelists. So, just a word about International Women's Day. It takes place on March 8th every year to celebrate women's rights and inspire people to act in the ongoing fight for gender equality. It is a day that the United Nations has sanctioned as a global holiday, and it celebrates women's contributions to society, raises awareness about the fight for gender parity, and inspires support for organizations that help women globally. The theme for 2023 is Embrace Equity. Equity isn't just a nice to have, it's a must have. And a focus on gender equity is essential to our society. And it's critical to understand the difference between equity and equality. So, as we embrace equity in 2023, we want you to truly embrace it. And so, our conversation today with all of these phenomenal women is really about just that and hearing from them, in their own words and their own stories, how they are supporting that fight every day. So, women represent 49.7% of the American workplace, 40.7% work in a full time role, 24.7% serve on boards, and represent 16.3% of women in leadership roles, such as CEOs. So, our first question for our panelists today is can you share with us your hope for gender equality?
All right. So big question, obviously, I would say there's sort of 3 points, right? One is to equalize those numbers, right? It's wonderful to have, half or, in some places, majority women in the workforce, but getting people up that hill so that they are the CEO, so that they are the leader, I think is essential. And that's essential not just for representation, that's essential financially and economically also. Women making the same or more as men is going to give them more of a voice in the election process, which is something that I'm concerned about. More of a voice. Oh, I'm getting nodding. I love that. More of a voice in their communities, more of a voice. I think economic feminism is a real thing. So I think that that's really important. Two, when we think about equity and we think about representation, it can't just be, frankly, women that look like me, right? I think traditionally it has often been white women of privilege, who are the people who enter these rooms. It has to be women, inclusive of women from different communities, women from communities of color, trans women, non-binary people. I think these are all important points that we need to see when we think about equity. And the last thing I would say about equity is, like politics, it is local. It needs to begin in your home as well. It is a matter of, for those of us who are partnered up or in relationships, it is a matter of ensuring that there is support so that, a woman's work is not just an ancillary to what a man or a partner might be doing, so that it is supported structurally in your family to give you a chance to make sure you are in the workplace and you are achieving. You're not, forced to drop out because there's childcare and there's other needs and it falls to the woman.
So, I totally agree with all of that. What's not to agree with? Right? Exactly. Um, and I would also just advocate for um, equity, economic equity, which is also related to policy equity. So women not being penalized for being pregnant, having a pregnancy, and having to drop out of the workforce. You mentioned childcare. That's a huge factor for women being able to re-enter the workforce after having a baby and continuing to stay there. And it's not just women who are concerned about that. Um, in this time um, of our government being in our healthcare, we have to really fight for our continued equity to make healthcare decisions for ourselves. our right not to become pregnant if we don't want to be, um, and um, and to have our full options of contraceptive options. And I would also argue that health equity has a lot to do with that as well. So, you know, um, why should women have a much higher rate of dying from a heart attack than a man? And certainly, if you get into race, that's even worse for Black women and Black people. So, I agree with you. I think it's a definitely a multifactorial problem, but we really have to advocate for all of that.
So, obviously, and I agree with everything that you've said, but I just want to think about how for a second, right? So we talk a lot about needing equity. We talk a lot about equalizing that pyramid, but how does that happen? How do we get women into these roles and into those rooms? And I think it's on all of us. We've historically talked a lot about mentorship and bringing somebody along, but really, we need to change that conversation a little bit, and we need to talk about sponsorship. And it's not, always driven by that junior person coming to you and asking, right? It's on all of us to actively be involved in pushing people forward, pushing women forward, pushing people of color forward, because we do need that diverse voice in these rooms, in these seats. And I will tell you, I think differently, and that's a good thing. That brings a different voice. So, I think differently than Christina. I think differently than some of my male colleagues. That's okay. That's a good thing. But I only got here because somebody helped me along, right? And so, from my point of view, that this is kind of the call to action, right? It's not going to happen organically. Yes, we need to think on a very large scale. We need to think about policy. Yes, I absolutely agree. And it's incredibly hard. It's hard when you have a young child. It's hard to be career focused. And even, things happen in the family. Where women tend to be the ones who are responsible for elder care and for child care and for other aspects, right? So all of those things make it that much more difficult. But it's really on all of us to push people along, to know what their strengths are, even when they don't, right? Because this is generational. We have not always been in these rooms, in these seats. A lot of us don't know that we can. So those of us who get to sit here, that this is our job. It's to tell all those people behind us that yes, you could sit in the seat. If I can do it, so can you.
It's gonna be hard to. They said it all. I think for me, it would be wonderful the day when we no longer have to point to certain industries that are predominantly male and then celebrate the woman who gets in and write press releases about them getting appointed to that position because it's something special. So that would be wonderful, right? When there is no predominantly this or that industry to represent people in leadership, that would be really great. And I want to echo the how, and I think for me it's been really important to have a network of, particularly for Latina women. The challenges are amazingly difficult, and even more so for new immigrant Latina women that also have language barriers and so many other barriers coming into the country. So I would love to see more Latina women in leadership roles of all kind, for sure. And the how, I specifically agree with one of the things you said, Svetlana, about creating a network of support, and I benefited from that. And hopefully we could chat a little bit more about that later. But that is really important, and seeing women like yourself in the leadership roles and seeing women encouraging you to move ahead in your career and have those aspirations, I think is really key to getting there.
I'm the last one, so.
So yeah, I know.
So, very interesting. First, I want to say thank you. I think putting this panel together is a first step for Health on Hospital. Is a wonderful opportunity. I'm so excited to hear the statistics, Nicole, Thank you. Just embracing us in this panel, it truly reflects that this organization definitely is 100% for gender equality. And I take a lot of pride in that because it makes the challenges much easier because we all get it. We all understand the importance of not only mentoring, which is, the number one thing that we can do, creating those opportunities because the reality is we all agree, but taking the steps. And I'm glad to see that we're all in certain positions that we have a little bit of flexibility that we can make sure that the positions are available for women as much as for men, and giving women an opportunity as well for leadership roles. And I 100% agree with Svetlana. I think that it's very important not only mentoring but sponsorship. And it takes a little bit of time sometimes, but we have a responsibility to kind of embrace some of our younger leaders and kind of support them through the path because most of the times we all know that you can't do it by yourself. You really need the extra push, not only emotionally but realistically. You need someone to really tell you what are the steps. And we're not, especially women, and this is only my personal opinions, most of the times we don't really find a lot of people that hold you by the hand and kind of help you through and tell you and lead the way. And it's very challenging because society already, there's a lot of obstacles as it is. So we have to find people that kind of not threaten, not feel some sort of way that you're trying to take something from them and kind of help you. So I feel that this is a wonderful panel. I like everyone here because we have gone through the path and we all have our own journeys, but we have an opportunity and we have the flexibility to develop others, open the pathway for others, and also embrace them and kind of like be sponsors for them. And I take responsibility for what I do, and I love to support people. And I didn't have the luxury of a lot of people looking like me in positions that I'm holding or I've been responsible for, but I want to make sure I might be the first, but I'm not the last. So I agree.
Thank you, thank you. So it sounds like we all agree that it's everybody's responsibility to embrace and support equity in the workplace. And, the way that we do that is to challenge our gender stereotypes, call out discrimination when we see it, draw attention to bias, and seek out inclusion. And I hear us all as panelists really embracing that and acknowledging that that's what helped us. So collective activism is really what's going to drive the change in gender equality from grassroots action, such as our panel today, right? This is very grassroots, and just elevating this and scaling it so that it becomes, a much broader momentum in our society. And so being included and, having a sense of belonging, feeling right about your place at any table, in any organization, in any space, is really important. So I'm going to ask Wendy to kick us off with our next question. Tell us about one of your most challenging professional moments when you felt your voice wasn't heard. How were you able to navigate it?
That is an excellent question, and thank you so much for asking that.
Oh my God.
And I'm actually going to. There are many moments like that, and I'm just going to give an example of a hospital where I worked, and in this hospital, there were, let's say, 20 plus chiefs of service, 3 of whom were women, and it would happen all the time where one of the women, including myself, would say something, and then the conversation would go on, and then, 5 minutes later, one of the men would say it, and then everyone would say, "Oh, what a great idea!" And
All the time.
all the time. So I don't have to get specific enough to say that when we can get to a point where situations like that don't happen, and I applaud everything that this system is doing in terms of gender equality, I think we still have some work to do when we talk about gender equality for our medical staff. I think that that is one area where we have a lot of work to do. And while we talk about overall statistics, we really have to think about it. And one of the ways I think to um, one of the ways to really think about it so that we can understand why this would have an impact is that oft times when we are trying to effect um, changes across a population. I gave the example earlier of women, and this is not women within health and hospitals. This is women across the country having worse outcomes for cardiac disease. So why is it when a woman comes to the emergency room with signs and symptoms of a heart attack, she's not diagnosed quickly, and she is more apt to die of a heart attack than a man if he were to present with the same signs and symptoms, okay? So that is true. So sometimes when we have people in positions who can affect changes to try to correct disparities such as those, it is helpful to have someone who can understand the problem themselves, articulate the problem, and who cares enough about the problem really to put all resources and all thoughts into trying to correct them. So that is why representation is important, and we need to get to situations of gender equity also in our medical staff so that some of these disparities of gender inequality can be addressed.
Opening it up, ladies, jump in.
I like to say, I have a funny story. When I first started doing press relations, I worked for a mayor who liked to call me Cupcake. Um, but he called all the young women Cupcake. So that was interesting, and we had to kind of deal with that. And we had to talk about it among ourselves. Like, are you comfortable with that? What do we do with that? What if, he does it in front of other people? This was very publicly known. Um, he did mean it in the dearest way, I have to say. But it still made us feel uncomfortable, and so we had to address it and ask that we not be called Cupcake. So that was pretty straightforward. Um, but other than that, I feel like I've been actually quite fortunate not to be in situations where I feel like my voice is not being heard because I am a woman. I've been super fortunate. But there was one instance, and I don't know if I was just blind to that, whether it was an issue because I was a woman or something else. But I remember this particular instance right here at Health and Hospitals at the beginning of my career. I didn't think something didn't. I thought something didn't make sense. It was a decision that was made that didn't make sense to me, and it had to do with my work in communications. But a decision was made, um, and it was really hard for me because I felt deeply that it wasn't the right thing for Health and Hospitals and the staff involved. And it took some time um, I kind of let it be for a while. But it was a really hard time for me to manage that decision because it affected my everyday and how I managed my staff and how I had to communicate with other staff, and I had to bring everybody together even though we weren't together. It was a difficult thing, and I guess I didn't really fight it very hard, and I'm sorry I didn't fight it so hard. But eventually, it became clear that it wasn't the right thing. So that's the irony. It became clear to many other people that it wasn't the right decision, and ultimately, the way that I thought things should be became the way it is. I hope I'm not being too cryptic in this, framing this. I could be more specific, but I don't want to. So I was vindicated, I guess the word is. So that was the one moment that I really struggled with in my career, and I'm not sure if it had to do with me being a woman or something else. And I'm sure that we question those moments a lot, right? And we should, right? I mean, is it because we just have a really bad idea, or is it because somehow our voice is not being heard, or our position or experience is not being respected and honored and understood, right? Um, that's a tough one. I don't know that it's always so clear to us when that situation is in front of us, you know. So it's really good to have other women who have had similar experience that you could kind of share these situations with, right? Because you also want to be thoughtful and respectful in how you respond to these situations. And having insight and advice from other women in leadership is priceless, I think, to help you kind of navigate situations that are not always obvious, right? They're not always obvious. Um, so anyway, that was,
It's a very valid point. I think that you hit something that is key in terms of sometimes you're not sure whether whether you're not being heard because of your gender, or is it because, so in general, I have to say my journey has been very interesting. I have had a lot of challenges, and I think that throughout my I guess my career, my life, I have learned to um, be an advocate for myself. I become my own voice because I learned very early when I first came to this country that I had a lot of things working against me. And I say that because of society. It doesn't mean that it's a fact, but it's challenges that I had to become aware. So I knew what I had to deal with. Not that it made me stop from pursuing what I needed to do, but you have to have self awareness. Otherwise, it becomes more difficult. So for me, obviously, being a Latina, being a woman, being black, being overweight, being, that I have an accent, everything was working against me. And I had to realize that you had to come to a different country, different culture, different language to realize that you're already at a disadvantage. And if you allow that to prevent you from pursuing um, a betterment for yourself, career wise or education, then you're just going to become just one more of the statistics and not, pursuing and pushing. So even if somebody was trying not to hear what I had to say, I just I had to say it. Like I became strong to stand on my own 2 feet and make a decision. If I have something to say, I will say it. And if the person feels uncomfortable, that's on them. I never disrespect anyone, but my message has to go across. Whether they acknowledge it, take it, and go, and decide to ignore it sometimes politely. But that's okay. I had to, I don't want to burst with an idea and having something inside that could contribute to something bigger and not say it because I'm afraid or I'm not being heard. I put it out there. And if they want to take the credit, let them take the credit. But, I can't help it on that end. Eventually, it will become our idea. But at the end of the day, it's just my personality. That's how I learned to deal with those challenges. And the truth is, I wouldn't change any of that for anything because that is what made me be the person that I am today. And trust me, if you ask my mom or anybody else, I'm like a whole different person compared to when I was growing up. I used to be shy, guys. I used to be. You're not gonna believe me, but you can ask my mom. I used to be shy. I did what I was told. You told me turn right, I would turn right. Go left, go left. Now it's like, really, why? Like, is that really what I want, or is that what you think is the right thing for me? I make my own decisions because we got to deal with our consequences. So as a woman, it takes a lot in society to have your own voice. I had to become my own advocate. So that's the only way that I handle. Of course, I have like 100 different scenarios where I could say, maybe they didn't hear my idea, but it's how I handle it that make the difference. And I think that's what helped me get through all these challenges and not use them as things that made it difficult for me, roadblocks that will hold me back. Because I need to represent for other people. It's not just about Christina, right? It's about people that need to have the strength to move forward and to accomplish their goals. And if I'm not leading them, if I'm not using myself, my challenges as a point of, I guess maybe as a point of reference, what advice am I gonna give somebody else? How can I tell them to follow my leadership when I can't even make certain things, get through them, or are obstacles? Let them hold me back. That's my take on that.
It's really funny that you say that. I'm actually a very, very shy person. Nobody here would know that. But I am, and I always have been, and frankly, I haven't always advocated for myself. But honestly, if I didn't at certain key moments in my life and in my career, I wouldn't be sitting here today. So I'll actually tell you a story from when I was growing up, and I was in school. I was getting my master's degree, and one of the options to graduate was to do a capstone project, and the other one was to do a residency. And well, the residency, it was like a paid job, and I had like no job at the time and no money, so it's great. So I go to the advisor, and they say, okay, you could do a residency and we'll send you here and here. And I said, well, can you send me to Cornell? Like, I know they take residents too. And they looked at me and they said, no, like, I don't think you're not the right fit for them. And I said, okay, but you sure that, like, I really want to go there, like I really want to interview with them. And they said, no, you're not the right fit for them. And this went on for weeks. They sent me to all these other places, but they wouldn't send me to Cornell. And I kept on coming back and coming back. And I said, well, could you just send me? I'll go wherever you want me to, but just send me. Like, I want to go, like, I want to interview with them. And eventually they did. So they sent me to Cornell, and I interviewed with the chief administrative officer of the physician network there, and she hired me. And if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be sitting here today. That was like my first job in Cornell, and then they hired me for a job after that, and after that, and after that, and after that. And if I hadn't advocated for myself at that point, um, my career path would be very different, and I would have different experiences. I've been very fortunate. I've had the the honor to watch some really amazing female leadership. Very different, and some folks who are like, we're old school, right? Who came up through when the time was much even more difficult than it is for us today. And I remember her saying to me, well, when I was young and I was coming up, and I was 9 months pregnant, and like, I delivered, like, I went to work, and that night I delivered, and the next day they showed up in my hospital room and asked me questions about work, and it was so difficult to get here. Like, this was my journey, and I remember thinking, oh wow, like, thanks for doing that. I'm so glad I don't have to. It's so much easier now. And you know what, in some ways it is at certain levels. So as you start out, there's a lot of opportunities. You just heard there's 64% of health and hospitals is female, but there's not that many of us sitting here, right? So yeah, it is. You could get started, but like, how do you move forward? And it's, how do you find your own voice? That's the only way you're going to move forward. And it's hard. It just really is. It's challenging. I don't think a lot of us are taught to advocate for ourselves, and to be vocal, and to be pushy, and to be, out there. I think that's hard for a lot of women. But it's incredibly important, because that voice at these levels, it's not always there. And we're 50% of the population, so 51% of the population.
What did it say? We give birth to the rest of the
Well, that is true as
I mean,
well.
right, everybody's got a mother. Well, not everybody. I mean, but I think that's exactly right. I think it may not surprise you to know I wasn't shy. I've always been pushing. But I think, in addition to finding your voice, and I don't mean to like minimize that, because that's enormously challenging and consequential no matter what your personality type, there's also the need to find allies, to find mentors, to find partners, sometimes in a strategic way. And when I'm thinking about this question, what was the time my voice wasn't heard? Truthfully, it was a gender inverse of what you might expect, right? So I just started practicing law. I was at the Department of Justice. One of the things that, I was lucky enough, and this was luck, to get staffed on like a big important case. We were working on what's called the consent decree, which is the settlement you enter with the judge, right? And like, there was sort of a hierarchical process, right? So the team on the ground doing the actual legal work, we would sort of pitch the ideas for the consent decree, and they had to get approved up by the assistant attorney general, whatever it was. And so my boss, who was a man, who was incredibly supportive of me. I mean, by the way, when I first, well, anyway, incredibly supportive of me. he brought me to that meeting. I had no right to be in that room. Let's just be really clear. But he brought me to that meeting, and I had this idea for this settlement that was not in our area of law. I had sort of borrowed it from another area of law. It was perfectly legal. It was perfectly appropriate. I thought it sort of drove the point we were trying to make. But it wasn't something that was done in the area of law that I was practicing. And he pitched it, and he gave me credit in the meeting, and they laughed. Both of them, like, literally laughed. And this was, his boss was a woman, and that person's boss was a woman too. And it was like, oh, like, it was the worst moment, both because I really believed in what I was doing. I'd spent a lot of time kind of working up this concept. And also, like, these were the women in power. These were the ones I wanted to see. And I was like so pumped to be in the room with them. And, it was terrible. And so, we kind of, and it's sort of an iterative process, what we were doing, sort of held our powder, kept our powder dry, whatever that expression is. And, over the next few weeks, I kept going back to my boss and saying, what about this? What about this? What about this? And, he was a receptive audience, and he helped make the pitch. And, I didn't have much access to these women, but when I did, I did. And together we got it into this consent decree. And it was the first time that had ever been done, and blah, 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 blah. But like that, in that moment, particularly as a very junior woman, I could not have done that by myself. Like, I needed a mentor, I needed a sponsor, however you want to say it. In this instance, that person was a man, and, the people sort of pushing me down were women. So, like, I think, and even now I think about it, it is so important to have those relationships. And, I think there's a level of comfort often in having them in women. And I think, to Anna's point, there's a level of sort of shared understanding in many ways. But, I think who our allies are and who our supporters are, we need to be very open-minded and thoughtful about who we see, and who we kind of choose to partner with, because it might not be the people you think.
Yeah. So definitely, agree with finding your voice, owning your voice. I'm a big proponent of being your own cheerleader, because a lot of times when you have those tough moments and you feel you aren't being heard, you still have to exist with you. So being able to push through that and still forge ahead and come back the next day and give it another try is really important, and encouraging your own self to stay at it, persevere, and push for it. And I agree, Deb, that allyship is incredibly important. And to all the men in the room, we need you to support us in this particular area. If you see it, step forward and embrace, that honor, because it is an honor to support us when you see us being challenged, or you see us not being supported. I think, Deb, you hit it right on the nail. Starts in our own households with, asking in our own households for that level of support and collaboration as well. So I think when we think about owning our own voice and these difficult moments when we have them, in the workforce, I think it's just incredibly important to also know who you are at your core, right? And what your value system is, and because that's what guides you every day. So it's really refreshing to hear that this table knows who they are. You have your voices, and even in those difficult moments, if you're doubting that, you still know who you are. And I really love that Christina's like, I'm not giving up, I'm coming back. Over and over again, because it's important that I get my voice out, and whether you like it or not, I still need to be heard and respected in the process. So I'm going to move us to our next question. When we embrace equity, we embrace diversity, we embrace inclusion, we forge harmony and unity, and we help to drive success for everybody, right? And equality is the goal, but equity is the means of getting to that goal. So through the process of equity, we can reach equality. So embracing equity is really important in all of its forms. And to that end, I'm going to ask our panelists, are there any daily practices you credit for elevating your growth and success? I'm going to ask Christina to kick us off.
Okay. Thank you. I try to have a set of core values that I use, and I try to hold my team, accountable for the same things. I think we have to be very clear in our delivery, in our communication, in our expectation, because you can't be successful if you're not able to articulate the message of even the goals. What is the strategy? What is the plan? What are we trying to accomplish? So communication is very important to me. Um, Alignment is important to me because again, the same thing. We have to be able to have a vision, and we have to be able to have a team that understands what we're trying to accomplish. Because you can't have everybody trying to go in different directions. Um, and accountability. You have to be responsible for yourself. You have to be responsible for the team. Some of us know that it's very challenging when you're trying to align the team and hold everybody accountable. You can't be a CEO of a hospital if you're not accountable for what happens in the hospital. You got to develop processes where you can make sure that the team understands that it has to be good communication and expectations and alignment. Everything has to come together because something happens and I can't say, oh, it wasn't me. That's not how it works, right? So accountability is important. Not only because I'm responsible for the staff, I'm responsible for protecting them, I'm responsible for providing guidance, and helping them have the tools that they need to accomplish the goals or the guidance that we are aligned to accomplish. So everything has to come into place. I know this is something that we say every day, and we say it all the time, but I had to try to have some core things that I use to make sure that we stay in place and focus and prepare my staff, and we can accomplish our goals together. So that's kind of like the core values that I use to help me keep myself accountable. Same way that I hold my staff accountable.
Sure.
Are
What
we
about you,
gonna go
Hannah?
in order? Oh my God. I do know that I have like daily things. I think it's more like values, right? That you try to bring with you every day to work, to your life. Um, I feel really fortunate to work at health and hospitals because I feel like here, compared to any other place I worked in my career, and I worked some really wonderful places. That's why I've been here this long, I guess. The values that we advocate for as a health system are the values that I live with in my life, right? Like compassion, and I know we say that all the time, but that's really important to me, really understanding where other people are coming from, and trying to help them, and um, the values of embracing diversity, and letting bringing to the table different ideas. I think that's important. um, like in my career here, like I'm not the expert on a lot of things. All my staff are here, so thank you for coming. um, I'm not the expert on a lot of the things that my staff do, right? I learn from them, right? So uh, being open to learning from them and still being accountable for our successes, it's a kind of hard balance to make, right? But I think that's something that I I have to deal with every day, right? And that's important to be conscious of it. Other people will, you will learn from other people, and you have a lot to learn from other people while you're a leader, but you still need to be that leader. So how do you balance all that? I think that's interesting, right? And being organized, planning. I know it sounds corny, but thinking ahead, I think those are things I bring to the table every day, right? Thinking ahead and predicting what's going to be needed, and making my team um, be the most useful to the health system is something I think about a lot all the time. And understanding what's happening in the organization so that we could be ready to respond and shift gears and do our work with excellence in response to all the changes. And this organization has gone through so many changes, right? That is something that it's an important thing that I deal with every day here. So.
What do you say, Svetlana?
So many things. Some of the things that are important to me is to be a leader who listens to hear and not listens to talk. So that is something that is really key and something that I bring with me every day. Um, I also think it's incredibly important to bring your empathy and your heart with you. Yeah, we all have to make lots of difficult decisions every day, right? And frankly, being able to make a decision, that is actually incredibly important, right? So, sometimes you just have to make a decision. You have to leap. You have to be willing to jump, and be responsible for what you jump into. And I think that's, the first time I sat around a table and everybody said their opinion, and it got to me, and I said mine, my opinion, and that's what everybody's gonna do, because I was the leader, and that was my opinion, and that's the pathway forward. Like, that blew my mind, really. But you have to be willing to jump, and you have to be willing to stand behind your decisions. Sometimes they're going to be wrong, and actually, that's okay. Like, everybody makes mistakes. Being willing to own your mistakes, being willing to still make them, being willing to make that decision when it's hard, but really listening to those around you and having an open heart. Like, those are things that are really important to me. And the other thing that's really important to me, and took me a very long time to learn, is that you really do need work-life balance. For a very large part of my career, I prioritized my career. I prioritized my work, and that's great. And but there's got to be a balance. There's certain things that you're better when you're rested. You're better when you interact with your family and your friends and your loved ones and your kids and all that. Um, that's what makes us whole human beings. That's what helps us make decisions. And I think that's actually important. So I really try to push my team. A lot of the folks on my leadership team have young kids. Um, they should spend time with them. Like, those are times we're never going to get back. And it's not a detriment. It only makes you stronger. The ability to step away lets you see a bigger picture. So those are the things that are important to me and my leadership style.
Oh, thank you. I would add, and I'm so happy to see so many of my team members here from community care, and they've heard me say it quite a few times. Work is what we do, it's not who we are. And while we do bring ourselves to work, I think fundamentally it's a way to keep the humanity and the compassion and the empathy by remembering they're people who have roles in our organizations and to do specific things, but first and foremost, they're people. And so when we have tough moments or it becomes very stressful, is remembering just what you said, that this might be a mother, a caregiver for elderly parents, and really using that to connect and keep the humanity at the forefront. And I would say that, another one of my leadership principles is that I use every day is, what is my purpose in coming to the space that I work in? What brought me here to begin with? What do I want my legacy to be? How do I want to be remembered? What is the contribution? And one of my favorite quotes that I also utilize a lot is Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective Leaders, where he talks about begin with the end in mind, right? So when you're in any role, what is the legacy? Because you're not always going to be there. And so what's the impact you're trying to make, and how do you inspire the people that you work with to go on that journey with you? So, Wendy?
Oh, thank you. No, those are all wonderful, and I agree with, I think, what I'm hearing all of you say, which is it's about relationships. It's about relationships with our families. It's about relationships with the people we work with who are in our inner circle. It's about relationships even with people who we maybe only have, kind of intermittent interactions with. I'll never forget, I was working actually with a vendor and trying to bring them on, and it was taking a little bit of time, and I got to know so much about him and his family just because of the time we had to spend on the phone. And I said to him, I said, it turned out that we did get it over the finish line, and then he told me that he was leaving the company. And I felt so bad. I was like, oh my goodness, like I feel horrible. And he goes, no, no, this is good. This is to be expected. He said, but you've always been so kind and so helpful. And I said, because you know what? I said, even if you leave, what's to say 5, 10 years down the line, you're not in another position and we meet again. I'm going to want you to have a positive, right? I'm going to want you to remember the a positive thing about me and not that I'm someone to avoid. And so, with whomever we're dealing with, I think relationships are really key. And if COVID taught us anything, it's that tomorrow isn't promised, and we really have to embrace what we have today and understand that everyone who we're interacting with, you're right, has other stuff that they are dealing with that we may or may not be aware of, and so that's incredibly important. And then the other thing I would say is that um, I always try to remember that I'm representing health and hospitals, right? It's not just me, Wendy Wilcox, out there. It's me, Dr. Wendy Wilcox, Chief Women's Health Officer. So, whatever venue I'm in, I'm thinking um, of, of how I represent this entity and can bring the best things forward. And what are we about? We're about patients. And what's our true north? It's to make sure that the people we serve get what they need from us and that we are doing our best to enable them to be the best that they can be. And so I would say that's just another thing that I am try to embody and keep in mind as I'm going about my daily work.
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of what my colleague says resonates, relationship, spending that time with your families and friends. Organization for me is really key. I try to spend some of my time on Sunday to, plan out the week, and, sometimes to like a disturbing level of detail. For me, that's sort of, I think, a security blanket. I've always done that. It makes me, I think, feel better. For those of you who know me, I think humor is also incredibly important in day to day life. Like it is, you know, it is hard for me to not make the joke or find the joke. Sometimes, I have to shut my mouth. But I think that's also about being who you are and, your values, but also, kind of being your authentic self and what it is that you bring to your team, to your, I think of everybody as my clients, to your team, to your clients, to your boss, to our community. I hope that I am being an authentic person and not just, here I am an SVP.
Sure. As I think about it, one of the questions is, as we are talking about our experiences and, the lessons we've learned is we're talking about it as women, and we're talking about it in a way, where we feel an incredible responsibility. And as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, how do we get everyone to share in this responsibility, right? And not just have us be the owners of it. And there is great excitement and passion that comes from sharing in this responsibility and supporting each other every day, and how we can be a part of the solution, and not just problems, not just focus on problems. So I want to encourage everyone to really think about that. How do we create a community of support beyond our workplaces, to really embrace equity? So encouraging our family and friends, as you just heard, that's really an important part of our balance. Working together to positively impact, change, in our all the places that we spend time in the world. So I want to ask our, audience, a question about how do we think that, we can support equity on International Women's Day? What are we thinking are the simple things that we can do to do that? And for our panelists to really share with us, you know, in general, what are some of your, ideas that you have, and what suggestions do you have for women in the workplace to just really help them to find support, create support, accept support, because we sometimes struggle with asking for help and accepting help. What are your general ideas? And I want to encourage us as we think about that and we respond to that to think about, Wendy told us over the last year, we've seen our own country try to diminish our autonomy over our right to make reproductive health decisions for ourselves. We continue to read all these articles about the fact that the gender equity gap is still so wide. But we also hear that women are, leading the forefront. We're raising families. We are, winning elections for some of our political leaders. We're the driving force, but yet still there's this sense of we're being contained still. So, what are your suggestions for leading in a time like this, and getting through our day to day?
I think, and I mean, I think about this in terms of advice to anyone in the workforce, and maybe particularly younger women, is I think you have to be really intentional about what you're trying to do. I think, I always feel like, and maybe to Svetlana's point, this is to my detriment, but I always feel like you need to kind of commit to your career, or for me at least, commit to your career and what your values are, what your goals are, what you're trying to get done with your work in the same way that you commit to your relationships and your family, because you are, to the point Christina made, you're it's you at the end of the day. And I love my family. I am incredibly lucky and grateful to have that family, but I also want to be contributing something that is me. And it's it's hard out there. You have to be very intentional about what it is you're trying to get done, and you have to, I think, kind of accept that, like, if this is a priority for you, there will be times where you are sacrificing. And I also want to be clear, that's not for everybody, right? Not everybody cares to be or wants to be a leader, and that's different from saying like people aren't given the opportunity. But I think knowing yourself and being thoughtful yourself, intentional with what you're trying to do with your career is very meaningful. Like, there are people for whom maybe a creative pursuit outside of the workplace, that's what's really driving them. So they come in and they do their job, and they can do their job competently and be a contributing member, but that's not really where they want to put all of that energy. I think that sort of introspective, knowing yourself, checking in with yourself, making sure that what you're doing is really the path that you want. I To me, that's really important.
Deb, I think that's actually really important, especially early on in your career. I think it's really important to figure out for yourself if you're on the right path. And that's not always easy, right? We find a job, and that's the job that we do, and then maybe we get promoted because we're so good at our job. And a lot of women end up getting themselves pigeonholed. I think sometimes you have to be willing to leave. And sometimes that means you have to be willing to leave. And sometimes that means you have to be willing to go to somebody and say, I'm going to do my job, but I'm really interested in what you're doing. How can I help you? How can I learn about what you're doing? For a very long time, like I never really kind of focused, and I never thought I'd be sitting in the seat that I'm sitting. That wasn't my focus. That wasn't my direction. It's not like I, intentionally took steps to get to where I am. But what I did do was every single job that I had, I was very thoughtful about what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it. And so it was, to me, it was like, okay, let me figure out what I don't want to do. And then I have this whole wide world and I could try different things. And sometimes that means that, yeah, you do have to make sacrifices. It's not always rosy, and it's not always pretty, and sometimes it's really hard and it's very overwhelming. But if you feel like you're investing in the core of who you are, in your own values, in your own direction, in your own path, it ends up being worth it. At least it was for me. I mean, I'm very lucky. I've had a lot of support in my life, both from my family and from leaders who I worked with. So but you know what? I've had to make some hard decisions, and I've had to leave comfortable jobs, and I've had to kind of make a change and take a different path. And I don't regret any of it, but it was not easy. And I think we kind of have to understand that for ourselves. What are we interested in? What do we want? And sometimes it's not to be a CEO. And that's okay too. I feel like we're sometimes hard on other women who don't want the same things that we want.
Yeah.
Right? So I think being kind to ourselves and being accepting of others, that's what I think is important.
I like what Deb said about being intentional because I think that's what being a woman today requires. You need to be intentional. Whatever that thing that brings you joy and how you establish your own success, I think you need to think a lot about it and focus on that. And be intentional. I'm an accidental leader. I wasn't intentional. I didn't get here.
There's
I
no
didn't
such a
get here.
thing, but
I didn't get here with any like plan in mind, but I feel like everyone should have one. I don't think that it just everyone's gonna be as lucky, right? I feel like I was fortunate, right? But we can't risk that anymore. We can't risk just being lucky. We can't count on being, around great people who give you opportunities. That doesn't usually happen. So I feel like being intentional with how you define your own success, whether it's professional or not, is so important. Maybe for everyone, but I think more so for women. Um, and yeah, and it doesn't have to be being in leadership position. Again, I will go back to what brings you joy, what makes you feel like you're a valued member of our society. What is it that you really want to accomplish in your life, and have a clear path to that. I think that would be my advice. And then something I said earlier: build your network. Don't um, don't wait. Find other women, like-minded women. Um, if they don't exist out there, start your own network. Start with a couple, build it up. Um, Create your own rules of what network you want for yourself, because whatever you want for yourself is going to help a lot of other women, I assure you. So don't waste any time. Build it. If you don't have it, start tomorrow. Start a meeting. Invite a few women. Um, I would definitely recommend that to everybody. So,
And those of you in position of power, show up to those meetings.
Yes, that is so important.
Yeah.
Like, yes, show up.
I don't know if Nicole realized what she has done, but she's just creating a network now. I was laughing because I'm like, I didn't realize we worked together so many times. I didn't realize we have so many things in common. And I have to echo what Deborah said. I didn't realize, but I'm funny too, Deborah. I think I'm a comedian, so thank God. I was like, yes,
realize that, though.
yes. Sometimes I have to explain my joke, but that's not on me. That's somebody else, right? But no,
I get them.
yes. And I agree with Svetlana. I agree with Deb. We definitely have to be intentional. I love that. And I disagree with you, Anna. I don't think that you landed in a leadership position by accident. I really don't think that. But it's okay. I was thinking about it because I remember my first, what I would consider looking back, my first leadership role, and it happened in high school. Right, I was in high school, and I was a very good student. I used to be, but there was a time that I was having a lot of difficulty. It was impacting my grades. I was going through hell outside of school. I was very dysfunctional family, very dysfunctional environment. But I didn't share that with anyone. But they saw my grades going down, and they show interest, and they developed this wonderful. It was like a pilot program with wonderful groups, and I'm like, I don't want to be part of any group. They say, no, this is good because you can help others. They can help you, and I'm like, oh, sure. So started this group. Of course, I took, the main. Me was about everybody else. So me, I tried to focus on everyone else to help everyone as long as they didn't pay attention to me. So I became like I took the leadership role of the group. I was like the number one, helping everyone. Everybody loved me, and nobody paid attention to my problems. So it worked out perfect. But that was not intentional though. But that was a survival technique. But I think, it's important to have a purpose. I think you do have to. It's not for everyone. And I know throughout my journey, I shift careers, which is interesting. I did start, Health and Hospitals being my home. I love this institution. I love this organization. I started in a different field. Some of you probably know I was a caseworker when I first started with the organization. Don't add or subtract, but it was about 20 years ago, okay? I know I look very young, right?
You are.
But when I
You
first
are
started, one thing that made a difference for me, everyone always telling me, "Oh, you shouldn't do that. Oh, you shouldn't do that. That's not in your title. That's not." I'm like, guys, don't worry about what I'm doing. I want to learn everything, and I always did my job and everybody else's job. I was learning everyone else, and I was always interested. And yes, maybe some people say, "Oh, that's not. You don't need to do that. That's not in your scope. Whatever." I say, just don't worry about what I'm doing. Just worry about you. And I have to say, that's who I am, and that's the decision I made for me. I don't want to just do what I'm supposed to do. I want to do more, even if I just learn more. I'm not talking about having a slave mentality or that I'm doing everybody else's work. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about learning. I want to learn what I'm supposed to learn, and I want to learn what everybody else is doing. I want to. I just knowledge is power. Knowledge doesn't. It's not something you carry. It's not like you carrying something and you can't. It's heavy. The more you know, the better it is for you. So I was okay with that. And there was a time where I was like, you know what? This is great. My career was doing great, but I wanted to do more. Some of you that know about social work, it was okay for me to help people, but I wanted to help people in a broader sense. I wanted to be more instrumental in kind of decisions that impact patients or impact staff or impact people, as opposed to just help one person at a time. So I decided to change careers, but still within same organization, I was always looking for changes. I was always looking for things, like you said, Svetlana. I look for something, become good at it, but I was already observing things that I wanted to do differently. And I remember I had this. I mean, I had a lot of bosses, but the she's still my friend. I think one of the toughest bosses I had was a woman, and I still tell her, I say, I learned what to do from you, what not to do, and what lines not to cross. She was a tough boss. She was really instrumental in my career, I think. But it's important for you to also learn from people. And I know sometimes we say you want to mentor people, but you select people, but people have to select you too. They have to believe in you, your style, whatever your goals are. They have to be kind of interested in what you're doing, because not everybody agrees. We have different styles. Everybody has different style, which is okay. I'm very comfortable with that. I'm a people person. I think that being a social worker to me makes me the best CEO you can meet, right? I have to speak for myself. Why it makes me the best CEO? Because I care about people. I care about people. I care about their voices. I care about representing them. I care. I talk to everybody the same, whether you the senior VP or the housekeeper. To me, everyone has some value to add. I learn from everybody, like Anna mentioned. I don't pretend, and I never say I know everything. I don't know anything. My staff knows everything. And I learn from them and I empower them so they can do a great job. And in our role, sometimes that's what it makes a difference, because they are the ones bringing in the value, and I just represent them, support them, provide them the tools that they need. So my job becomes harder just because I need to advocate for them, so they can in turn feel supported, do the work, and in turn support the patients. That's the way it works. Now, if you're a miserable person, I have no problem making decisions about that too, and helping you to find a different path somewhere else. You have to make tough decisions. You gotta feel comfortable, and I feel very comfortable. But it's interesting that sometimes you end up in certain places. I never believed that I was going to be a CEO. I don't think that was something that you dream about. But I always wanted to do more. You always have to have a purpose. And I'm going to steal that, Deborah, now, because I love that.
Good.
But you have to have something that you want and pursue it. And everybody knows there's a formula for that. It's not like you can have short-term goals, long-term goals, but you're not gonna reach your long-term goals unless you take steps towards that. And they're not gonna come by accident. And unless it's like 2% of the people, nobody's gonna be knocking on your door and telling you, you're so great. We're thinking about something for you. That usually doesn't happen. It does happen, In one time in my life, it happened to me, but not all the time. But you have to want something for yourself. I'm not gonna come and say how great you are if you don't believe you're great yourself.
Right.
So you have to, you have to want something for yourself. And you're right. It's not everything that you don't have a clear vision of. I don't know what I'm gonna do 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Don't tell if you, obviously, but you have to start making decisions about what that's gonna look like for yourself and how you're gonna get there. So you do have to have a purpose.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I mean, it goes back to the first question you asked, which is, you know, or where the answer that we all gave, which is finding your voice and not being quiet, right? And so, um, while you may be doing that in your role, I totally agree with Christina in that your passions may actually end up coming out in different ways, and everything doesn't have to be poured into your job. You may find an advocacy group that you like, and that's how you're going to express yourself with your job. You may want to go back to school and learn something new. My kids tell me I love school way more than any of them, but that's okay. It's all good. Um, or forming your own group, which also
Yes.
is amazing, right? I mean, there are so many ways to find your passion and express it, and I think the most important thing is just to recognize that and to go ahead and do it.
I will say one more thing. One of my first bosses, he was telling me about his career and a weird job he had. And I said, "Did you like that?" And he said, "Going to work was like eating a big chocolate sundae." And
Oh.
that, I think about that all the time because,
true.
like, there's lots of chocolate sundaes. And maybe your chocolate sundae is in work and maybe it's in this job this year, but a different job next year, or maybe it's somewhere else. But going to work was like eating a big chocolate sundae. It was such great advice.
I love
Um,
I mean, if I had to give a piece of advice, I would say surround yourself with people who challenge you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because if you're surrounded by people who just say yes to you, it, you never think outside of your own box. But if you surround yourself with people who are willing to challenge you, I think ultimately it might hurt, but you'll get much farther.
And I would add constantly checking in with yourself about, you know, where where do you see yourself contributing is really important, and being comfortable taking risks around that. I remember in 2006, I was very uncomfortable. I had a job negotiating managed care contracts with big hospital systems, and it was like, mean girl, because they're trying to negotiate the best deal for themselves on the hospital side. I'm negotiating for the health plan, and that's how those interactions went. You got very mean, because your job was save money for your company. But one day I asked myself, this doesn't feel good,
Yeah.
right? And when the contracts are done, you just kind of spend your time watching reports, like, are they staying within the budget? And so I started to ask myself, is this truly what I wanted my legacy to be professionally? And I landed, on one of the many days I surfed the internet, saw a job to work international. And I don't know what about that job spoke to me, but that was my risk. I literally interviewed, I traveled overseas to interview, and then I packed up in October of 2006, moved my entire belongings to a foreign country, and went to work for the US government and the US Embassy in a foreign country, trying to find my purpose,
Yeah.
trying to find that passion and feel connected to, what I wanted to do. And it was a big risk. And when everyone found out that that's what I intended to do, they were like, "You're crazy. Why would you do that? And you're dragging your poor son with you," And my son was 10 at the time. But for me, I was dying, and I knew I was dying, and I felt like this was an opportunity to really test: is this what I'm supposed to be doing? What does having more meaning in work look like? And so I did, and it lasted for 5 years, 5 wonderful years, in South America and Sub-Saharan Africa. And when I came back to this country, I knew what my purpose was. There was no question. And one of the first things I tried to do was get a job at Health and Hospitals, because this is where my healthcare love affair began. as a 15-year-old Nicole enrolled in a licensed practical nursing program in her high school, first day of clinicals at Kings County Morgue. Kings County Morgue. And so, I always had this dream of coming back to this system and paying it forward. So I always told people this is where my love affair with healthcare began, right at New York City Health Hospitals, Kings County. So take risk. They're really important and really help you discover, what your true passions are and what meaning you want to contribute. So I'll take us to our final question, right? So we've all had these incredible journeys as women, but we started as young women, girls, young women, and
Still.
we start to get older. I'm not going to say, right, Anna. So, a question for us as we look back on our journey thus far, what would we say to our younger selves now that we are where we are?
Join that pension.
Oh my God.
I didn't join the pension for my first 4 years of city service. And guess what I had to do? Buy it back.
So I was like, no, there's no way.
No one told
oh my
me
God.
how important that was when I was 22 years old, right? Like nobody bothered to explain that to me. My family didn't know. My mother didn't know about that, right? And no one told me. So anyway, I don't mean to be funny. It's serious.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Making good decisions.
So,
But we're good here at Health and Hospitals. Like we really encourage all our employees to join the pension right away. Like there's always a lot of conversation and support about that. I didn't have that when I started in government, So anyway, so that's my
Yeah,
one
let's sort of
advice.
speaking of dollars and cents.
like,
I would tell my younger self not to worry quite so much. I mean, my family immigrated here when I was 9 years old. I watched my parents kind of, struggle bringing us up and like land here and make a life for themselves. And, I took all of that really personally. And so for me, when I talk about leaping and being willing to take that risk, I didn't always, even when I didn't always feel like I had that, that sort of ability to like jump and like, okay, well, mom and dad will like pay my bills. Even when they could, it wasn't something that I was willing to allow myself to, ever partake of. So, um, being willing to say, okay, like, all right, like I'll jump anyway because it's the right thing for me to explore. And taking that time early on when you are just starting out and nobody knows I ask everybody that I interview, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And when somebody tells me that they know, I'm really frankly very surprised because I still don't know. But when you're starting out and you're in those early phases of your career, being willing to jump and to learn and to take on different roles and do things that are uncomfortable, even if that means taking a pay cut, even if that means taking the time to find yourself, right? I think that's very hard for some people, especially for folks who may sort of come from like similar backgrounds as I do, where you kind of saw it, right? You saw how difficult it really is. It's hard to be willing to say like, look, this doesn't fulfill me anymore. Like I need to find something else that fulfills me, because there's a paycheck that comes in, right? So I think I would tell my younger self, take a breath. It'll be okay. You'll find your way, and leap a little more. It took me a while to get to the leaping.
I mean, I'm trying to think back. I think for a long time, anyone would say, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I'd say a doctor. And then I got to college, and I really was struggling. I wasn't sure if I really, really wanted to do it. I majored in something, biomedical ethics, where I could go to law school or medical school. I just wanted to keep my options open. And ultimately, I decided on medicine, which I do not regret one bit. However, I do think that I did have a lot of questions about would I really get to do what I wanted to do, which clearly, I think in my mind had a lot to do with advocacy and kind of a greater message. When I was in college, I was a women's peer counselor. And it's interesting, people are like, oh, did you know you wanted to be an OBGYN? No, I didn't know that. But looking at my earlier experiences, it makes sense, right? I was interested in women's issues and getting the word out and talking about them and advocating, et cetera, et cetera. And so it all kind of goes together. And then I think the reason why I ended up getting my master's in public health is because I wanted to think of things in way more broad terms. Um, kind of like what Christina was saying. Yes, I was interested in helping patients, but as I started to see patients in the South Bronx, which is where I started, and every patient who came in had a similar constellation of symptoms, I started to think, is there a better way to deal with this than just me doing the same thing, 20 times? Or is there a way that I can more broadly affect change so that everyone's not, I can help more people with a wider swath. And so, now looking back, does it make sense, my trajectory? Yes. If you had asked me then, this I don't think was in my wildest dreams of where I would end up. Am I happy? Absolutely. So, maybe it's what Svetlana said, which is, don't worry so much, like you'll get there. But I think that's what I would have said.
And mine is similar, but I think it's a variation on a theme, which is like what I would literally say is like it's gonna work. Like I knew I had sort of a vague sense of what I wanted to do. I knew what excited me. I sort of knew what my goals and my values were, but I didn't know how to like articulate all of that. I didn't know. Like I always say, like I got a law degree and an MSW. I always say like if I'd known what the word public policy was, like, maybe that's what I would have pursued. Like, I didn't know the words for it, but I kind of knew the feeling and the gut of what I wanted to do. And, like, that is, kind of freakishly close to where I ended up. And, God willing, will continue to progress somewhere. But, like, so just that feeling of, like, trust yourself, like, trust your gut. It's going to work. Like, that would have been nice to hear.
So for me, Nicole, I think that what I would say to my younger self, probably nothing because I wouldn't listen. No, I think that it's interesting because I'm listening to everyone here, and it truly resonated with me because I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. So I was like, oh my God, I don't think at the time when I was dreaming to be a lawyer, I really understood what it entailed. But my life took a change, and I ended up being, into social work and then a master's of public administration and all that. So, but it's interesting because back then, I think that the only advice I could give myself is don't listen to the noise because we do get a lot of advice from people, and sometimes I always say, obviously that's a social work in me, right? It's not that people have bad intentions; it's that everybody has an opinion, and that's okay. That's respectful. You can listen to everyone, but don't pay attention to everything because everyone has a different experience. Everyone has a different perspective. Everyone has a right to an opinion. You have to listen to everyone, but make what the decision that's right for you. Because I always go back to that. Ultimately, it's your decision. You have to end up with the consequences. So try not to listen to the noise. I was not easily influenced by people. I had all kinds of friends. I mean, that's a different panel. But just because I have friends that did things that were not okay, doesn't mean that I was going to do it. And we were okay with having a friendship. I know what you have to be respecting on my decisions. You're not going to influence me because you're an idiot, and you're making the wrong decisions. That's on you. It doesn't mean that we can't be friends, but if you're not able to respect, so I think it's just not listen to the noise, make decisions for yourself, and have a purpose. You see, Deborah, I told you I was going to steal that.
I like it.
Have a purpose and know what you want.
Yeah, I would share for myself, it's stop and enjoy
So true.
what you're doing at times. I feel like a lot of times it's on to the next. And after that, it's on to the next. And there isn't enough staying in the moment, appreciating where you are, and, really taking it in, how far you've come. And so that's what I would tell my younger self is to spend more time in the moment, appreciating what you're doing, what you're accomplishing, what you're learning about yourself, what you're learning about other people, and really appreciating that. And so I'm going to recover with my team a little bit because I skipped over our mindful moment at the beginning of the program, and in the spirit of being present in the moment, I'm going to invite Caitlin Komars, who's our new wellness program director for community care, to help us be present in this moment, because what we did today, I think, is phenomenal. I work with these women, and I'm telling you, I learned so much about them just from this panel. And I promise you, the next time I see them, I'm really going to see them because of what they shared today. So, Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin Komar. I am a proud licensed clinical social worker and the Wellness Program Director at Community Care. My goal today is to guide you through a centering exercise designed to quiet the distractions and competing priorities whirling in our minds. By doing so, we can create time to immerse ourselves in the presence and wisdom of these amazing women, each of you included. It is truly a joy to be here to walk with you through this centering activity, the 5 senses grounding exercise, in our shared space of sisterhood. Before we begin, let's check in with ourselves. Being a woman, we hold so many essential roles. We hold and make space for everything and everyone around us. But what about us? Do we make the space to ground ourselves? How many times have we had to push ourselves to multitask and to persevere? Grounding is one of the best ways to remain present so we can manage stress, strengthen the relationships that are important to us, and acknowledge and appreciate the present. This moment is about reminding ourselves that we deserve to take as many moments as we need to check in with ourselves. Let's begin our exercise with the knowledge that although we are taking this journey together here today, we can also take this journey virtually anywhere and anytime. Let us begin our exercise. Oh, my apologies. It can be your office, it can be the conference room, like today, on the subway, or at home, or anywhere where you feel you need to take a moment. I'm going to call out a few different tests designed to help us be present by connecting with our senses. As I present these next categories, count to yourself. And as you do, take a moment to truly appreciate each of the items and senses you connect with. First, find 5 things you can see. Things that naturally draw your attention. It could be a blouse, something outside, the color of a wall. 5 unique things that stand out to you. Next, find 4 things you can feel. Is it the texture of your sweater? The feeling of the carpet under your feet? The support of the chair beneath you? Choose 4 different things you can feel. Now, find 3 things you can hear. It can be the sound of my voice, the soft hum of heating unit, or ambient sounds of our busy city. If you're having a hard time with this one, think about your favorite song or sound. And now, find 2 things you can smell. I hope they're pleasant things, but we can do our best. It could be someone's perfume, the coffee you brought, or your hand lotion. If you run out of scents, maybe think about your favorite floral scent, your favorite bake shop, or the scent of your favorite outdoor space. And I really hope it's not the 2 train, but no judgment. Finally, find 1 thing you can taste. Maybe a sip of your water or coffee, a piece of gum or candy, maybe even the sweet taste of success. But seriously, if you run out of items here, think about your favorite dessert or an amazing dinner you've had. anything that brings you joy. Now, bringing your attention back to this room, take a moment to check in with yourself. How do you feel? I truly hope you feel clear, refreshed, and ready for a continued amazing afternoon. As I leave you, I ask you to allow yourself to continue to focus on the present. You deserve to embrace everything beautiful that comes your way. What is meant for you will not pass you. Thank you so much for being here and allowing yourselves to open up to the art of mindfulness. And thank you, Nicole, and the rest of this incredible community care team for sponsoring this shared moment together. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to take this opportunity to thank the team at Community Care who worked so hard. And as you can see, we have lots of incredible women on our team. They worked so hard to put this event together. You did an amazing job. I told you it will go very well, and it did because that's the way it was ordained. And so I just want to thank them, and I want to thank our panelists. It's an honor to have, we're a subset, again, of all the incredible women who work for New York City Health and Hospitals. But what an incredible group of women. And hearing their stories, I hope that the rest of our colleagues across the health system saw themselves and heard themselves in those stories and saw what is possible for themselves, for others, and as women, what is possible for our communities, for our families. And so it's been a powerful conversation. I want to say thank you, Christina, Anna, Svetlana, Wendy, and Deb. It's just an honor and a privilege to know you and to work with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So we invite folks to spend a little time networking and saying hi to each other. And thank you, David, for all of your support as well.
Thank you for having us. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Excellent event.
Thank you. That was
Thank you.
wonderful.